Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Energy Futures Lab event in conversation with Rubina Singh. So we first met Rubina back in November last year when she participated in a panel discussion for Energy Futures Lab as part of our Energy Festival. So at that time we were discussing positive action to build an inclusive environment, and we've kept in touch since and thought it would be really nice to bring Rubina back. She's very kindly given up her time today to come back and join us for a follow-up conversation that we wanted to time roughly around International Women's Day, which fell earlier in the month. So Rubina has an engineering and business background, having spent time studying and working in energy systems engineering in Switzerland, in Australia, in the US and in the UK. She's an established leader in strategy and innovation with deep expertise in energy and the EV sectors. She's been at Centrica since 2018 and is currently leading the Ideation Delivery group. This is a cross-functional team responsible for identifying and rapidly launching innovative low-carbon solutions, including EVs and in energy management. So today we're going to delve a little deeper into her work to make the energy sector more diverse and inclusive, such as her role with the Powerful Women's Network. We'll also discuss her career journey so far and her vision for the future of the energy sector. We'll have a little bit of time at the end to take some questions from our audience, so those in the room and to you who are joining us online today. Feel free to put your questions into the chat for those of you at home. We're recording the event and we'll be making it available on the Energy Futures Lab YouTube channel after the conclusion of the event today. So thank you again, Rubina, for coming. It's lovely to see you again. I said in my introduction that your current role is the head of Ideation Delivery at Centrica. So I guess I'm wondering what exactly that role means. Maybe you could start off there by telling us a bit more about what that role entails and what a typical day at work looks like to you.
Sure, of course. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me back. So the Ideation Delivery Group is a new division within British Gas, where basically, as you mentioned, the idea was to help identify the high potential ideas from across the business and then rapidly help develop and launch new service and solutions to the market with a focus on low carbon solutions. And on day to day, depending on where we are in the process, it could look very different. So basically, the way my team and I have been running the program over the past year is in a three-step process. So the first starts with the ideation phase, where we look at ideas coming from across the business. Centrica, we have thousands of colleagues, they're our best assets, lots of great ideas coming. So we run innovation challenges. One of the last innovation challenges we ran was around electric vehicles to get the new ideas coming in. And while we're getting those ideas, we then do a quick technical commercial feasibility analysis and really select the high potential ideas, which we can rapidly then take to the market within 6 to 18 months time frame. And then we work with the idea generators, the particular groups, on developing those ideas with a real focus on our consumers to understand what they want, what they would need, what will work for them. So we involve our consumers in every part of the journey, really testing out the ideas with them. Then we work on rapid designs, technology development, trialing it out before then handing it back to the business to launch it into the market. So day to day, it can vary quite a bit. It's very exciting. We could be holding customer interviews. We hold design sprints within the group very cross-functionally to get people from across technology, marketing, products to come together, work together and really ideate and develop the designs that we take. Then we test it out with customers. We do commercial and technical feasibility analysis. Some days we're running trials, we're installing EV chargers. So there's a lot going on depending on the day. It's quite exciting. It's quite cross-functional. A lot of my work is the overall program management, managing my teams, working with the different stakeholders across the business as well. So that's what goes on day to day. Though right now I am on mat leave, so my day to day is quite different.
Wow, that sounds fascinating though, and the cross-disciplinarity element certainly comes through in your description, and I can tell you're very passionate about that element of it. That sounds great. I mean, was that, in terms of how you got to your current role as leading that team, would you say your journey through Centrica was always quite as cross-disciplinary as that? Did your other roles in the company bring together the engineers, the customer focus, and the market side of things as well?
So actually, since I started in 2018, my roles have been very cross-functional, but it was quite different earlier until I joined British Gas and set up this team. So when I started in 2018, I actually was working at Centrica Business Solution, which is the more B2B side of a business. A lot of my work there was commercial and growth strategy. It was quite an international role in terms of seeing we have a whole suite of energy solutions from combined heat and power, solar, storage, electric vehicles, how we can help our customers really disseminate those and adopt those solutions across the geographies. So a lot of my work was UK, but also North America, Mexico, Italy. So it's quite an exciting role.
Yeah.
Seeing what solutions would work in which markets, what customer segments to work with, what partnerships, so very cross-functional as well. And then after that, I moved into Centrica Innovations, where, again, quite cross-functional, but a lot of my focus was on the technology roadmap, which technologies, obviously, we have the energy transition. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening, lots of new renewable technologies coming in. What does that mean for us? Which technology should we be looking at? What is the business case for us? So a lot of it was technology development, building those business cases and championing it within the business. And then from there, I think it was quite seamless transition into British Gas, but then it was about let's bring the innovation in-house. And that's when we set up the Ideation Delivery group to work with the different parts of the business on a day-to-day basis to help innovate, not just in terms of technologies, but also processes, business models, propositions, and then take it to our customers.
Okay, so it sounds like you started very broad, perhaps working with the international, I mean, looking at what would suit markets, different markets all around the world, because I guess those solutions could look very different. And then you were moving gradually more and more, maybe narrower and more in-house, that you, bringing that development more within your own team and in-house. Okay, fantastic. So beyond, I'm thinking a little bit beyond your experience working in a big company. So obviously you've got huge amounts of experience working for this company, working abroad as well. But what about some of your activities and engagements, perhaps beyond that perspective of the energy sector? So I know that you're also involved in the Solar Impulse Foundation, and you're also an advisor through the European Innovation Council. Is that correct? So you're advising startups who are working towards driving sustainable development, sustainable innovation, I guess. So I guess that's a totally different perspective and viewpoint. So what can you maybe comment a bit how that experience compares to the views and the experience you're getting working on the Centrica side of things? So they're completely different, I guess?
Yes. Well, they're different, but they're relevant. And I think there's lots of complementarities there because, well, Centrica being one of the leading energy and gas suppliers in the UK and supplying new energy service and solutions. And then there are the startups, which are bringing a lot of new technologies, new innovation into the market, especially on a journey to net zero. So with Solar Impulse Foundation, for those of you who might not be familiar, it was actually set up after the Solar Impulse flight, which was the first completely solar and battery powered plane to fly all around the world, which I think is amazing. This happened in 2015, and it shows what can be done with renewable energy technology. It was absolutely amazing in my opinion. So I was thrilled when I was approached to join the foundation as an advisory expert. And what the foundation's goal was to do was to bring 1,000 sustainable solutions from across the world to show what can, again, be done with renewable energy technologies, and then to give governments, corporates, businesses, cities, countries, a platform where they can go and find the solutions and then help adopt those. And as of last year, we actually found those 1,000 solutions. So as an expert, I was involved in identifying and assessing the different applications for many startups, with solutions in general, doing the environmental, technology, and commercial feasibility analysis to see which one should go forward. And then with the European Innovation Council, so they launched the Scale-Up program recently, where a total of 10 sustainability startups have been selected from across Europe. And a few of us are then working with the startups to help advise them in terms of the strategy, scale up, how can they really amplify their impact. So it's great because it's great to see that innovation coming, the new ideas, the technology development. And now the challenge is how can we scale them up? How can we facilitate better partnerships and collaboration between industry, between startups, between universities, and how we bring it all together, create the net zero system of the future.
Yes, it's not a straightforward task.
It's not.
Bringing together these incredibly different, often very disparate groups of people
Absolutely.
who have the same motivation, but pulling it actually together into something concrete is very challenging, but exciting.
Absolutely.
Certainly. And would you say that's always been a passion of you, maybe like a guiding driver throughout your career, that kind of passion for innovation? Certainly, so I know sort of early on you studied initially electronic engineering and sustainable energy. So it sounds like perhaps you've always had that interest thread, certainly throughout your career. Was that the case, or was there points of your career when you could have maybe gone in a different direction, or you've had multiple interests and you kind of ended up on this path for a particular reason?
So I think for me, that was always the case. I think even since high school, I was very driven by wanting to help address climate change. I wasn't sure how I could do it. Sustainability was a relatively new concept at that point. So when I went to university, math and physics were my favorite subjects. So I started by doing electrical engineering. It seemed like the choice to make. But at that point, my university had also just launched a degree in sustainable energy engineering, which seemed like, oh, this could be my way of potentially helping me on my journey to help mitigate climate change. And once I started that, I started by studying solar energy, by creating solar cells in the lab, and I fell in love, and there was no going back for me. And to me, it seemed like a no-brainer. The sun's not going anywhere, the wind's not going anywhere. Let's harness it. Let's have this let's have clean, affordable, accessible electricity while reducing the carbon emissions. We can do well and we can do good at the same time by making sustainable energy sustainable. So that's what really drove me. And since then, I've been working on it. I started my career working as an engineer, as a solar engineer, mainly on developing those technologies, working in R&D in the labs. A lot of my early work was at the Fraunhofer Center for Sustainable Energy in Boston. I was working with a lot of startups from MIT, working on the different really cool, amazing technologies. And a lot of them failed. And they fail at what we in the industry call the valley of death, which is where startups, while they might have good technologies, aren't able to go ahead in terms of funding or commercialization or scale up. And that's what made me realize that a good technology might not always translate to a good product if there isn't the product market fit, if the customers don't understand what it is. And that's when I moved more from the technical to the commercial side of the business in terms of then helping the startups, developing the technologies, but de-risk it technically, de-risk it in terms of commercial aspects, and most importantly, in terms of having that customer focus, really knowing what your customer wants and really ensuring that product market fit. And so from there, my journey's become more on the commercial innovation business side of it, but it's always been renewable energy.
Yeah, certainly. You found your talent as you've gone through. Certainly, you've developed your technical expertise and then ended up in that more translation role. We're actually seeing it come through to fruition, definitely. So it sounds like you always had that passion there and had a reasonably solid idea as you went along where you wanted to go. We've got several students, certainly, so joining us today in our audience, and I think I'm quite interested to know your view on whether having that clear path in mind, whether you did always have it as mapped out quite as it sounds, and whether you think that's a good or a bad thing. Sometimes, when you go to interviews, you might get asked if you've got a 5-year plan, for example. I'm never sure whether it's a real strength to have that in place, because it shows that you've certainly got ambition, but perhaps that means you're also you're very kind of fixed necessarily, where is good, or is it better to have an element of flexibility in your planning, certainly? So whether you've got a view if there's one way better than the other, and in your own experience.
Well, I think it depends. So I think either could work really well. So for me, my goal has always been to work on helping mitigate climate change, on renewable energy. And but when I started off, I was quite focused that it has to be technical. I'll always be an engineer. But along the way, as you see, the industry is changing so much every day. There's so much going on. and you see where the needs are, where the challenges are. You also see where your passions are, which could change a long time. So I think it is great to be flexible, to really move and see what opportunities you see where. So when I started off with solar engineering, and this might not seem very different, but today a lot of my focus on electric vehicles. It went from engineering to business to innovation. So there has been that element of moving around a little bit. So I would say it depends on the individual person. If you do have a goal in mind and you want to work towards it, absolutely go do it. I don't think you should defer. But at the same time, if you want to explore your options, there's so much, and there's so much you can do. And I don't think it's ever too late to start or to turn around. If at some point you're like, actually, you know what, I'm done, I want to do something different, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you see, or in my experience, you see pros and cons to either of kind of the routes where you move around a bit, like you said, whether that's different companies or geographically, versus you can build up a whole wealth of experience perhaps by staying in one base. If you find yourself in the right environment, whether that's small or large company, you can find your own journey, I think. You can be very well managed and supported staying in the one route, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think maybe early on in the career, it might be helpful to try a few different things, just because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. There could be something you absolutely love, but until you try it, you wouldn't really know. So it couldn't hurt to explore a little bit. I feel, I mean, you're young, you're smart, you're straight out of university, there is no wrong answer.
No, true. So you touched on it a couple of times in terms of the massive changes and the exciting times that we're having in the energy sector at present. And you also touched earlier a bit about your work on EVs in particular. So I guess I'm going to move on to the next kind of thread of questions, and I'm really keen to know what interests you the most at present about where the energy sector is heading. If you've got kind of one thing that stands out, or several, feel free to discuss several.
Yes, I think it's a few different things. So basically, we are very focused on helping create the net and zero energy system of the future. I think there's a lot going on. So there's, in terms of renewable energy technology development, both large scale, small scale. I think one of the things we're seeing is decentralization. So solar panels on your rooftops, on your cars, potentially. There's a lot going on. And then there's also electrification of transport, there's electrification of heat, there's heat pumps, electric vehicles coming. How do we bring it all together? So these are industries that haven't traditionally worked together, which now need to. And at the same time, we're also seeing the power of data, of digitalizations to help manage all of it, to bring it together, but also for our customers and consumers, for you and me, to make this easy, to make it accessible, make convenience. I think there's a lot of really interesting work happening. What personally excites me a lot is that connection between smart energy and smart cars. So it's something called connected car, connected homes. I've written a little bit about it in the past, which is about how, as a consumer, you can help lower your carbon footprint, improve and deploy renewable energy technologies in your house. With electric vehicles, using smart energy technologies, how you bring it all together in an easily accessible, usable way. So that's an area I'm quite excited about.
When you're working with your consumers on that, do you find that they're really excited about this as well? Or is it easy, I guess, for you to work with consumers on this? Or is there some questions or resistance in any sense? Because to me, it sounds like fascinating. As someone who's just bought an electric vehicle, I'd love to understand how I could maybe integrate it with my house and everything else inside.
So a lot of the work that my team's done over the last year was along those aspects, and we do quite a bit of consumer interviews, and it's been great. The questions are quite varied, but I think overall there is this keenness to move towards reducing your carbon footprint, to seeing how you can get solar on your roof, how you can get electric vehicles, how you can improve the efficiency within your home, which would help reduce costs for yourself, but also help manage it better. So we are seeing more of an appetite from consumers to go on their journey towards decarbonization as well. We're also seeing more of an appetite towards smart home energy management, smart cars. How do you manage it properly? How do you manage it together? So, and at the same time, there are also, of course, a lot of questions because the industry is changing so quickly. So there are new technologies coming. So I think it is also on us to then help our consumers understand the different options, the different technologies that exist today, but that will also exist tomorrow. Not all of them are today. And while some of them are existing today, we do still need to go on a journey to make them more feasible for large-scale deployment in the future.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I was just thinking of some of the interactions we have through Energy Futures Lab and talking about people's concerns sometimes around changes and how, say, an electric vehicle might compare to what they presently have. So you have, I think, maybe range anxiety. It varies, but perhaps that's not as much of a concern as it was. But matters such as not so much of a second-hand market at present, or concerns
definitely.
about people may have about buying a second-hand or taking on a second-hand vehicle when they don't know the condition of the battery, for example. Do you see these challenges kind of coming through?
Absolutely. So absolutely. So while obviously the upfront cost of the electric vehicle is a concern as well, but as we're seeing in terms of the total cost of ownership, it will be reaching parity with those of ICs quite soon. But then a lot of the concern is also around charge anxiety, around range anxiety. In terms of long trips, how do we do? What if the charger isn't available, isn't accessible? And these are all good concerns. So while as the industry, we are focusing on deploying charging infrastructure, the government spend a lot of money, corporations are working on really ensuring that the charging infrastructure is there. Then there's also the question about making sure that it is actually accessible. And that brings me to the point of interoperability, where I think just making sure that consumers have access to it, making sure they have the right data, they know if it's working, where it's working, which ones they can do. And there are lots of different technologies and solutions coming up to help you with it. There's also charging at home, but actually 40% of UK owners don't have off-street parking, right? So if you can't install an EV charger at home, how do you do it? What's the public charging infrastructure like? And I think the two aspects to it. One is the actual infrastructure. So depending on where you live, in cities like London, it's widely available. There's quite a strong infrastructure. And then the accessibility, the interoperability are questions. But then also depending on where you live, it might not be there. So there are questions we as the industry need to address. We need to help create that environment, that infrastructure. But I think we can also help just make our consumers more aware of what already exists and what they can already use as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've only really had experience of recently is the difference in terms of the EV charging infrastructure in the public setting. So you might go from your supermarket car park to your service station car park, and you've got different companies who may run those sites. Then you've got to download the right app, and you know, it's not necessarily the most straightforward, I'd say, at present for consumers. Yeah. Right. So I guess you're thinking either on EV still, if you like, or we could move to one of the other topics. You mentioned a bit around decentralized energy as well. Just a general question, I guess, around other key challenges or opportunities that you're seeing in the energy sector and how this needs to evolve in terms of what we can do collectively. So maybe broader than Centrica, what can we be doing, I guess, and other opportunities and challenges?
Right. So I think there are a few challenges and opportunities at the same time. So one is around the infrastructure, as I mentioned, there's the physical infrastructure, then there's the digital aspects of it, right? Just making sure that we do have this integrated system that works together across renewable energy, across electric vehicles. And as now we're talking about electrification of heat as well. So both from a consumer perspective, but also at an industry perspective, with the growth in electric vehicles, with the deployment of heat pumps in the future, there'll be a lot of demand on the electricity grid. How do we manage that? So that's a challenge. The second is even in terms of the infrastructure deployment, where, for example, just for electric vehicles, where should the chargers go? How much should it cost? How do we provide access to the customers? What's the customer service like? So there's issues around there. And then thirdly, I would say it's just bringing it all together, because these are quite a few different industries that have not worked together. We need to, and we're seeing a lot of this. We're working across the industry, we're automotive industry, energy, heat, data, technology, we're all coming together, working together. So these are challenges, but there are also opportunities at the same time. So for example, in terms of the excess demand that is expected in the electricity grid, with smart energy management, demand side response, there are also opportunities. Could we potentially monetize this for the industry, for the customers? Where is that value? How do we extract it? So there's opportunities there. How do we collaborate across sectors? How can we work together to create business models that would work for our customers, that can help bring them value while bringing us, the industry, some value as well? So there are lots of opportunities. It's quite an exciting time. And then I think the third aspect is also the regulations having the right regulatory landscape to push this, to help deploy the right technologies and enable innovation at the same time?
Yeah, certainly. Is there a particular kind of position where you'd like to see, maybe a personal dream where you might think this is where I'd like the energy system to be in, say, 1 year's time, or 5 years' time, or 10 years' time? Do you have a specific kind of vision of what that looks like for you, or just, you know, generally want to reach net zero as a system? That's what we're all working towards as a group.
Well, for me personally, I would love to see where it's feasible. Every house is solar on the roofs, with battery in the garage, with an electric vehicle, with smart thermostats, and all of it working together, and all of that contributing to the grid, but at the same time being a little independent of the grid. So you have your own energy security, you have your own energy generation and consumption. It all works together, and you're potentially also at the same time interfacing with the grid, potentially making money when you're giving electricity back. So that would be my vision. But at the same time, obviously, there's a lot that needs to happen across industries. Firstly, we do need to see massive large-scale deployment of electric vehicles. With renewables, there's a lot that's happening on large scale, small scale. We're seeing decentralization. I think we need to see more development in terms of local networks, in terms of smart grids. And then again, I'll emphasize on the digitalization, the data aspect, how we can use that to enhance this, how we can use that to achieve this, but then also enhance the experience for the consumers, for you and I.
You have to take them on the journey with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Fantastic. So now for the kind of third segment of the discussion, I'd like to turn to some of your other activities and passions. So we've spoken certainly around the technical challenges that are facing the energy sector, but now I'd like to think a bit more about the challenge of ensuring that the energy sector is as diverse and inclusive as possible in order to have the best talent coming through and making sure that we can solve these problems together, definitely. And I know that that is something you're also very passionate about, and you're actively involved through Powerful Women's Network, so we'll come on to that certainly. And the kind of setup for today's event, in fact, was partly stemmed through our discussion around International Women's Day, and we've recently had Women at Imperial Week. We had a whole set of activities around that. So they were just at the early part of this month. So I'd like to start off by asking you for a little bit of your reflection on International Women's Day. So what you thought of it. The theme this year was breaking the bias. And was there any particular activities, would you say, or actions that either you were involved with yourself or that you saw come across over the course of that day and that week that stood out to you? Anything really innovative or striking, a person or a message or an activity, do you think, from that day?
So I think, so this year's theme was Break the Bias for International Women Day, and there was a lot of activity which I saw, which was quite encouraging. So at Powerful Women, we basically collaborated with Energy UK to take over their Twitter, where it was about posting the Break the Bias post, but with your pledges, what you personally can do. So that was quite interesting to see different people and their personal commitments and how they would help work more towards achieving a more diverse and inclusive workforce, which I think, which was quite heartening to see. But at the same time, I think what's important is to not lose that momentum and not to just have that burst of activity about everything we're going to do that we announced on International Women's Day. And then comes the next International Women's Day, and not much goes on between that, because we really need to work towards a more diverse and inclusive workforce. I just had a baby boy, and I personally would want to see a future where men and women have equal opportunity and choice to contribute equally at home as at work. Some of the stereotypes that we see, they're not there. The different biases, they're not there. And there's a lot we still need to do. So at Powerful Women, we do release statistics generally. And in 2021, less than a quarter of the energy companies in the UK had women on their boards, and only 14% of executive director roles were held by women.
Yeah.
And this is progress compared to the past few years, but there's such a long way we need to go. Yeah. So I would think that we do still really need to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, definitely. I think whilst International Women's Day is a fantastic celebration of activities from around the world, of course, it's not a one-day message, is it? It needs continuous action, certainly.
Absolutely. And today we have the energy transition at hand, right? Like industry is undergoing a transformation. We do need all hands on deck. We know that there's a very strong business case for diversity. Having women, having just diverse people from diverse background in the room is good for businesses, good for performances, it's good for bringing new ideas, solving challenges in a different way. So I absolutely think we need to accelerate that journey.
Yeah, certainly. So you brought in powerful women at that point. You talked a bit about the statistics as well. So in terms of the network, the initiative, what are the aims of the Powerful Women Network? Maybe you could speak a bit more on that, how it originated or how you became involved in the network as well.
Sure. So Powerful Women is basically a UK-wide industry initiative to improve gender diversity within the UK energy sector. And we aim to help women with the progression and leadership development in the energy sector. So we've set targets, which is to help achieve 30% of senior representation of women in the energy sector by 2030 and 40% of female representation in middle management by 2030. And the way Powerful Women works with the industry, with our colleagues, peers across the energy sector can be broadly categorized in three. So one is through campaigning and reporting, basically setting targets and goals and seeing and measuring the progress against it. So what gets measured gets managed. And as part of the statistics I mentioned, so that's some work we do in terms of helping encourage the industry to set targets and report their progress, but also ourselves release the annual stats to report on the progress. And our next one for 2021 will be released in May. In addition to that, the second aspect is supporting women and their careers through mentorships, through coaching, networking, various different aspects, and I can talk more about that. And then the third one is supporting organizations, enabling them in terms of understanding what more they can do to help improve diversity within the organizations, to help really drive inclusion and create inclusive cultures within the organizations as well. So Powerful Women's also set up the Energy Leaders Coalition, which is basically bringing together the CEOs of the top 16 energy companies across the UK. And this basically provides a safe space for them to discuss the barriers, to talk about good practices, and also how together as an industry we can work towards a better gender balance. So that's overarchingly what Powerful Women does. There are a couple of initiatives we're working on that I'm quite excited about, which we will be launching in soon over the coming months. So one is, again, while there's a focus on super important to have role models and senior representation of women and have the pipeline, but middle management has been a largely underserved area. How can we help both progress but also retain women in the middle management in the energy sector? So that's a study we've been working on, speaking with women, getting their insights. So that's something we'll be sharing in the coming months, which I'm quite excited about. Yeah. But then again, with net zero, with the move towards net zero, I think this is an opportunity to build back better, and this time build a balanced workforce that we can be proud of. And diversity, equity, and inclusion will play quite an important role in enabling us on this journey. So we're doing some work on that as well, which we'll be releasing in the coming months as well.
Excellent. So when you talked a bit about the statistics, so I noted them here actually in my reading ahead of time. So yes, only 24% of board seats and 14% of exec director seats are currently occupied by women. And as you said, I think they've had a slight increase year on year, but it's quite a slow pace. So when you're working with the energy companies, and especially the senior leaders from the companies, and you're getting their pledges and their commitments, and then perhaps it links a little to your point then about the middle management, their role in this. What is do you think the key hurdles and challenges that are maybe preventing us from taking the commitments from the senior executives from the energy companies and actually bridging that gap across to seeing real rapid change in terms of increasing female representation at that level?
Right. Yeah. So I think, well, the first step is to set targets and set ambitious targets, which we are seeing some companies do, which is absolutely fantastic. But then the second step is having the right initiatives in place which actually help drive and make an impact. And often, I think what's important is to understand from the women what are the challenges they're facing, what are the barriers, what support would they need, which would really help them. And that is some of the work we're doing as well currently. So I think the answer, there's not one answer. The answer depends based on the company, but I think what they can do is ask the right questions. And that's something we can help as well with, to really understand what are the right questions you should be asking to make sure that the right initiatives, the right policies are being implemented, which help those women. But I think there's also the need to make sure that it's very important that the commitment comes from senior leadership, but it needs to go down to the different levels as well, right? Because after all, that is the pipeline that goes up.
And so you mentioned a bit about your role in mentoring as well, or through Powerful Women, there's a mentoring strand. So it might be interesting to go back to that. Do you think that in your experience, mentoring and coaching, that's a really valuable tool that Powerful Women offer, but probably perhaps through other routes as well? If women can access that, is that something that you find is a really beneficial tool, I guess, to help bridge that?
So I think mentoring is one of the many aspects that can help women develop more. In my personal experiences, both being a mentor and a mentee, I found it very valuable. I feel like on my career journey, there's so many things I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have been here had I not been for incredible mentors. Sometimes I didn't even sign them up as mentors. It was people who were there for me.
Yeah, more informal.
Yes, and it was amazing. It was managers who helped guide me, who helped me come out of my comfort zone, who helped me develop my skills in different ways. I really couldn't have done it without them. So I do think finding the right people to support you, having that circle, having that mentorship can really play a very important role in your life.
Yeah. So I guess to people joining us today in the audience, what would be the best route for them to become involved with the Powerful Women Network? Do you think that's something that, yes, they would be able to join and get value from? Are there other ways that you think that they could benefit and help advance, I guess, their own kind of careers? So yes, what would the network offer to colleagues joining us today? How might they become involved, or what other avenues could they explore?
Sure. So actually, we are currently reviewing a strategy for 2022, but there's a lot of different ways you can be involved with Powerful Women, with the sector in general. So we have our annual conference. We do hold various different networking activities. We have Powerful Women breakfasts. We also have a mentoring scheme. So there are different aspects depending on what might be interesting to you. You can get involved in those aspects. And then, of course, we work with various different other organizations across the energy sector as well, who are looking to improve diversity in the energy sector, which we share through our newsletter. And our newsletter can keep you informed. So there's different ways you can get involved depending on your interest. But even more broadly, in terms of the energy sector, I would say, well, we need you. We need your brilliant minds, your great ideas. So please do come be involved. There's a lot going on. And I would suggest networking across the sectors, really seeing what areas there are that excite you. That's another way to understand what's happening and see how you can get involved.
So talking about getting involved, it seems like quite a nice moment just to pick up anything that's come through from the audience. So it is back on our original topic actually, but Michaela has asked, what are the main lessons that you learned when starting accessing startups? So what are the key factors that will help ensure a startup can survive the valley of death? So the main lessons you learned when working with startups, and what are the key factors that help you ensure that a startup survives the valley of death?
That's a good question. So I think there are a few different aspects. The one I would say is important is know your customer. Really, as soon as you can, start understanding who your target audience is, what do they want, what is it that they're willing to pay for. So really involve your customers from the onset in terms of your product development. The second thing I would say is don't be afraid to pivot. I've seen so many startups that start on one aspect, but by the end, it's a completely different aspect. So just go on that journey as you develop, as you talk to your customers, as you talk to your potential partners, your investors. Do not be afraid to pivot. So Yeah, and the third thing I would say is de-risk. From the beginning itself, whether it's a technology or business model, start de-risking as soon as you can, as soon as you have the proof of concept. You don't need to wait for the product to be perfect. Just have the minimal viable product, get it to the market, see how it goes, see who's taking it up, what the challenges are, what the issues are, see how much they're willing to pay. So de-risk it technologically, financially. So those are the three things. And the fourth, I would say, is quite important, is the team you have. Like in my experience working with startups and working with our investors, we really look at the team, because markets will change, technologies will change. You might completely pivot, but if you have the right team, you can succeed.
Yeah, fantastic. Sorry. So, got a question from Maria. From your experience, what characteristics do women bring to the leadership positions? Do you observe a different leadership style?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think, yes, different people in general bring different points of view, different ideas, right? And I think what women bring to leadership, and one of the big things I've seen, which I think is particularly relevant today, is empathy. It's a different leadership style, but also it's that being able to relate to your consumers. And consumers, as we come up with new products, new technologies, a lot of our customers actually are women. So having that, I think, is quite important. The other thing I think is just having a more balanced voice in the room. So I'll give you an example. Well, we're all familiar with the Alexa, with Siri, and all of them happen to employ, it's changed now, but when they were launched, happened to employ a female voice. Why was that the case?
True.
So UNESCO did a study, and it turns out that there was no women in the room when the decision was being made in the tech sector. And since then, of course, things have changed, but that brought about a question that, like, some basic things, like now that we're working on digitalization, we really need to make sure that biases aren't propagated. There are parents who do not want their children to grow up just assuming that we can give commands to Alexas and Siris with female voices. So I think women bring in a different perspective, and not just women, just having that balance. It's women and men in their same room, right? It's just having people from diverse backgrounds, whether it's inherent diversity or acquired. It's different ideas, different way of approaching the same problem, thinking about it different ways that women can bring, that diversity brings into the room.
Yeah, certainly. So you're not working in an echo chamber. Everyone, groupthink is just taking over. Exactly. Okay. And so let's have a look. So, so for according to Powerful Women website, mentoring is available for women that are about 5 years away from an executive position. So could you talk a bit more about any options for women who maybe have a lot less experience, so they maybe early stage career, 1 to 2 years of experience in the sector? Maybe that relates a bit to the new mentoring scheme that you mentioned was coming in.
So we are looking, and as I mentioned, we are looking at a strategy and seeing what areas we want to focus on in 2022 and going forward. So absolutely, as you mentioned, right now the mentoring scheme is more focused on more senior women, but through the Powerful Women Network, we are connected to other networks as well, where there is mentoring for women irrespective of where they're in the career stage. And as I mentioned, the work we are doing on middle management is something through which we'll be able to assess this and then see how the industry can help women in middle management, but us also as Powerful Women, what more can we be doing, or what could we be doing differently to help there? So I don't have an answer for you there, but we're working on it. We'll get you an answer quite soon. And we're basically looking to get answers from you in terms of how we can help more.
Yeah, so any ideas, feel free to reach out after the event or put it in the chat and we can share them with you and take them on. Fantastic. So I've just got a couple of maybe final closing questions, kind of bring it to a close in about 5 minutes. But one thing, so we have a master's program in the Energy Futures Lab. So it's the MSc Sustainable Energy Futures program. The students will shortly be starting their summer projects and then they'll be graduating, thinking about their own careers. This year, the cohort is over 50% female members of the cohort. one of the aims of the course is really to make and to support and inspire future leaders in the energy sector. So I think I'm interested to get from you, is there any other particular advice that you might offer these people? So you've spoken a little bit about, helping you're looking to us as well to come to you with ideas, but is there anything that you might suggest advice-wise for people starting out in their careers from our cohort, but more generally who are just launching out into the energy sector?
Absolutely. So my advice would be to follow your passion and to really keep learning. The energy sector is so dynamic. There's so much happening, so much growing. I would really suggest networking across the sector. It would really help you gain your breadth of knowledge and depth of knowledge, but also understand where the different opportunities are. And then the other advice, and I would give, which is basically helping us, is do come to run the energy sector, be the change you want to see in it. We need your brilliant minds, we need your ideas to come here to not only help us develop some of the technologies that haven't been created yet, some of those business models that aren't there, to help us capture the value, to help us together create on our journey towards net zero, but then also to help us create that balanced workforce we can be proud of, where we can get in different ideas, different ways of thinking, all working together.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, and you've been very generous with your time, and you've gone through your career journey, your technical passions that you're working on at Centrica right now, your mentoring, the work that you're doing with startups as well in your advisory roles, as well as your ED&I actions. I guess I'm interested to know, is there anything that really stands out? It's probably a tough question, but is there anything that really stands out in your mind as the most rewarding or exciting thing perhaps that you have done so far in your career path that stands out?
Well, so two things stand out. One to me is, most of my roles have been a little entrepreneurial, where it's been starting a new division or initiative within an organization, and I've absolutely loved that. And it's something I'm proud of. And whether it was Fraunhofer, my previous organization, or Centrica, starting a new division and then really helping bring that focus on net zero and how we need to go on that journey. It makes sense for the business and the planet. So that's something I'm proud of. And then the other thing is being involved with powerful women and trying to the best of my abilities to really help drive us towards a more diverse and inclusive culture. It is 2022. We're still talking about numbers like 24% and 14%. We really need to pick up pace there. And that is something I'm very proud to be working on, but there's a lot to be done, and I'm hoping I could contribute much more to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you say, change sometimes seems to happen so slowly, can't it? But I think through positivity and actions and initiatives such as, people like yourself, but not just individuals, obviously the bigger organizations that you're part of, absolutely essential. And yes, it's been really interesting to learn more from you today. So thank you very much for your time. I think we'll bring it to a close. We're almost at kind of 10 to the hour now. So we've had a really good conversation covering a lot of topics. So thank you for being so open in your discussions and from the questions that came forward from our audience members.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me here.
And I hope, that we can do something again together in future. So
thank you very much.
And thank you to all of you at home who joined us and for your questions. See you again shortly at an Energy Futures Lab event.